Hi, everybody. Welcome to Christian Home Said. My name is Jared. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe for additional second coming content. It also helps to support the channel. At this point, I don't remember how I came across this conference talk by Elder Bruce R. McConkie, The Coming Tests and Trials in Glory. I might be wrong about certain things. This video is going to be about trials and tribulations on the horizon, and we're going to investigate if we've already come across some of those. Maybe this isn't something in the future for us. This talk does come from the April 1980 General Conference. And before we get into it, I just want to remind you of a couple things that I've beaten to death, but I'm not giving up on this. On my spreadsheet called Quotes A through Z, on what's currently row 244, the topic is Future is Bright. We have all these quotes from various prophets and apostles and general authorities talking about the attitude that we should have when it comes to the last days and the lead up to the second coming. In fact, this was recently talked about in the April 2025 General Conference. Elder Dale G. Renlund of the Quorum of the 12 said, "When President Nelson speaks about the second coming, it is always with joyful optimism. However, a girl in primary recently told me that she becomes anxious whenever the second coming is mentioned. She said, 'I'm scared because bad things are going to happen before Jesus comes again.' It is not just children who may feel this way. The best advice for her, for you, and for me is to follow the Savior's teachings. His instructions are neither mysterious nor complex. When we follow them, we do not need to fear or be anxious." And then more recently, from President Oaks, as president of the church, this is from January 11th of this year. He said, "Young people can look to the future with optimism, in spite of war, political polarization, and uncertainty. Be happy. Do not be depressed. Trust in the Lord." By all means, people should not be depressed because we are surrounded with challenges, whether they are economic or political or social. That is part of what we were put here to experience. We are optimistic because we trust the Lord and know that He loves and He set us up. Sorry, He loves us and He set us up to succeed, not to fail. Okay. Um, and then the last thing before we move on to Elder Bruce R. McConkie's talk is I have a spreadsheet called Quotes False/Unverified. These are mostly prophecies or supposed prophecies about the future that either cannot be verified, they have not been commented on by any authority, or we have some that have been commented on and it's been said that they are false, like this popular vision of the destruction of America by Anonymous. Although people claim that it's John Taylor, other people in the past have said it was Joseph F. Smith and so forth. Joseph F. Smith and his son, Joseph Fielding Smith, have both said that this is a false prophecy, but it still makes the rounds on the internet, especially Facebook groups. Okay, so that being said, I haven't changed my opinion on any of that. However, let's look at what Elder Bruce R. McConkie has said in this talk. We have to take everything together. We can't just pick and choose what we like. You may have a certain theory about how things are going to go, but if you have a prophet or apostle who has said something contrary to that, then we need to listen. And it could be that you have two quotes that seem to contradict each other, but things may play out in such a way that they actually go together. Okay, so this first part, he's talking about the progress of the church up until 1980 and the future ahead. He said, "Along the way, we shall yet climb, hidden in the underbrush. Okay, along the way we shall yet climb, hidden in the underbrush, is the lair of the lion and the hole of the asp. Venomous serpents are coiled on ledges beside the path, and jackals lurk in dark caves by the wayside." Our onward course will not be easy. The way ahead will be blocked by a landslide of lasciviousness, an avalanche of evil will bury the trail. As we trudge forward, sharp rocks will cut our feet, rivers of lava will melt the soles of our sandals. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's talking metaphorically here. And we shall be hungry and thirsty and faint. The way ahead will be hard and the path rugged. Okay, later on. But amid it all, there is sorrow and toil and testing. The saints are tried to the full to see if they will abide in the Lord's covenant even unto death. Our gaze falls upon Carthage, where murderous devils in human guise shed the best blood of the 19th century. We see Nauvoo in flames and the holy temple of God desecrated by depraved and cursing fiends. We see snow and cold and death in graves as a weary people follow a new leader to their promised land. We see people cursed and smitten and driven as they lay. They're all on the altar, and we hear them sing with their might, all is well, all is well. We see prophet follow prophet as the faithful seek to prepare a people for the second coming of him whose witnesses they are. Now, by the way, if you're watching this and not just listening, I have highlighted any mention of the second coming or the millennium in red. He does it a lot throughout the talk. That's kind of one of the main themes of this talk is the second coming. Basically, the period between April 1980, when he's speaking, and the second coming. Okay, continuing. But our joy in rejoicing is not in what lies below, not in our past, great and glorious as that was, or that is, but in our present and in our future. Nor are the days of our greatest sorrows and our deepest sufferings all behind us. They too lie ahead. We shall yet face greater perils. We shall yet be tested with more severe trials. And we shall yet weep more tears of sorrow than we have ever known before. Okay, so that doesn't sound good. As I'm going through this, think about ways that we may have already seen this, because I think that we have. I actually have a whole thing to show you. When you put it all together, it's kind of a lot to take in, but we'll get to that in just a little bit. But do you believe that since 1980, we've seen some of what he's talking about here? Greater perils, more testing, more severe trials, weeping more tears of sorrow of sorrow than we ever have known before. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll share what I have put together in this video a little bit later. But we can see causes to rejoice and to tremble. We tremble because of the sorrows and the wars and plagues that shall cover the earth. We weep for those in the true church who are weak and wayward and worldly and who fall by the wayside as the caravan of the kingdom rolls forward. Okay, before we continue, I want to think about this. Since April 1980, what wars have we seen? I'm not going to do plagues. That's harder to do. But I've already done wars. I have a spreadsheet. I call it my second coming spreadsheet. It's not a timeline of the future, but a timeline of the past. Things that I feel are significant to the last days and the second coming. And one of those things is wars. So let's look how things have progressed since 1980 in regards to war. So he was speaking in the April 1980 General Conference. The Soviet-Afghan War had begun just, I guess, a few months before. But later that year, the Iran-Iraq War started. So we're just looking at most of these things that are in red in these columns right here. Okay. We had the war between the UK and Argentina over the Falkland Islands. Here's the First Lebanon War. Scroll up. We got the Gulf War. That was a significant one back in 1990, 1991. The Croatian War of Independence. There was the 10-Day War, or the Slovenian War of Independence. There was the Bosnian War, First Congo War, Kosovo War, Second Congo War. And then we get to 2001 with the Afghanistan War. We all know why that happened, why that started. And linked with that, in a way, we have the Iraq War that started in 2003. So we had these two twin wars that started in the early 2000s. We had the second Lebanon War in 2006. We have the Arab Spring, which wasn't a war per se, but it was a significant upheaval and just chaos that spread throughout North Africa and the Middle East, which actually led to the Syrian civil war. Okay, and then what else do we got? And then the Ukraine war that started in 2022 in February. I remember covering that and just thinking about how surreal it is to think that we have a major war, a major land war in Europe. It's the largest conflict in Europe since World War II. And then we had the Israel-Hamas war, which I guess the main part of that war is over in a sense. But like I've said many times before, I feel like that war has essentially been continued with the Iran war. Oh, and I don't know if I have it on here, but we had I don't think. We have, oh, here it is, the 12-Day War between Israel and Iran, and the United States took action in that war as well. But anyway, right now, we basically have the Ukraine war that still hasn't been resolved, and the Iran war is basically still ongoing. So there has been quite a bit since 1980. Let's read that again. We tremble because of the sorrows and wars and plagues that shall cover the earth. And of course, there will probably be more. I do tend to think that there's going to be the war of Gog and Magog and the battles of Armageddon and the siege of Jerusalem. I do tend to think that that's actually going to happen. It'll probably be a conventional war. That's why I'm so interested in the Iran war, because could that somehow escalate and become the final war? I don't know. But anyway, yeah. Okay, so let's continue. We see the Lord break down the barriers so that the world of Islam and the world of communism can hear the message of the restoration. We glory in the fact that Ishmael, as well as Isaac and Esau, as well as Jacob, shall have an inheritance in the eternal kingdom. We see congregations of the covenant people worshiping the Lord in Moscow, which, I mean, that's news to me. Like, it's news to me that there was any worshiping going on in Moscow in 1980. I know that there is now. I mean, the Soviet Union was still in existence when he said this, so I might have to put together some other timeline to see how that all played out. So Moscow and Peking and Saigon. We see saints of the Most High raising their voices in Egypt and India and Africa. I'm going to skip this next. Well, no, I'll read it. We see stakes of Zion in all parts of the earth, and Israel, the chosen people, gathering into these cities of holiness, as it were, to await the coming of their king. We see temples in great numbers dotting the earth, so that those of every nation and kindred and tongue and people can receive the fullness of the ordinances of the house of the Lord and can qualify to live and reign as kings and priests on earth 1,000 years. Okay, so a few things here. First, when it comes to cities of Zion and stakes, if we go to my spreadsheet called quotes A through Z, row 472 for New Jerusalem definition, there are multiple definitions of New Jerusalem / Zion. One is the actual literal city of the New Jerusalem that will be built in Independence, Missouri sometime in the future. You could say it has already started in the fact that we have a stake that's organized here. We also have a temple in waiting in the Independence Visitor Center. I was actually just there earlier today. My wife and I and our son and daughter, we went to that field over there. It's a great place to go run around and have fun. My son and I, we played catch, and it was so peaceful. And I love living here. But anyway, the Independence Visitor Center was built to be a temple. So at the very least, I feel like it has been started, but it's not. That's just one definition. Another definition is all of North and South America is the land of Zion. And then the entirety of the church is also the New Jerusalem / Zion. Let's read what Elder Bruce R. McConkie said in his book, The Millennial Messiah. Be it remembered that Zion is people. Zion is the pure in heart. Zion is the saints of the living God. And be it also remembered that the people called Zion build the places called Zion. Thus, wherever the saints build an old or a new Jerusalem, wherever they establish cities of holiness, wherever they create stakes of Zion, there is Zion. And where these things are not, Zion is not. So I just wanted to point that quote out. I have other quotes that go along with that. But essentially, your stake is a city of Zion. And I think it will literally become a city sometime in the millennium. That was the original plan when the Saints were here in Missouri. A stake was the same as a city, and a city was a stake. Okay, now going back to this, he points out specific locations. So he talks about the world of Islam and the world of communism, and how barriers are coming down. And they certainly have come down since 1980 because the Soviet Union has fallen. He talked about Moscow, Peking, and Saigon, and then Egypt and India and Africa. So I want to look really quick. I mean, we do this from time to time, but I like looking at the church's meeting house locator because this gives you a good idea of where the church is located. So let's start with Russia and Moscow. And yeah, as of today, uh, undoubtedly, we have many more members of the church in Moscow as well as Russia as a whole. From this, it looks like there's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 meeting houses in the Moscow area. There is a temple that's been announced by President Nelson for Russia, but things are a little bit complicated right now with Russia, as you already know. And then you have all these red dots in the southern part of Russia. I guess you wouldn't really have any up here in like Siberia, but there's plenty of red dots in Russia. He also mentioned China. Now China, there's still a lot of progress to be made there, but we do have a red dot in Shanghai. There's also been a temple announced for Shanghai. And then, of course, in Hong Kong, where we've had a presence in the country the longest. So there's a ton in Hong Kong. Looks like there's one in Macau, which is similar to Hong Kong. It used to be owned by, or leased or owned or whatever by the Portuguese. There has been a development, though. You would normally see meeting houses in Beijing, but we'll cover that later on. It's a story that we've already talked about, but there would be red dots in Beijing right now if it wasn't for what happened recently. Here's India. India is coming along. It has a temple announced, which is really surreal for me. He talked about Egypt. It doesn't seem like things have progressed too much. I don't know exactly what they were like in 1980, but at the moment, we just have one branch, the Cairo branch. It's English speaking. So I don't know. Um, I don't know if there were more branches at one time or whatever, but we do have branches in Israel. Here's one in Jordan. And of course, United Arab Emirates, where we also have a temple that's been announced. I always forget the which city. Okay, so not it's come on, come back. It just said Dubai, didn't it? Anyway, I think it's yeah, there we go. Dubai United Arab Emirates. And now I'm not allowed to look at the map anymore. Um, but yeah, things are coming along in the Muslim world as far as us having a physical presence there. We recently talked about Mali. Mali has seen some miracles lately where we've had some of these mass baptisms take place. In fact, he mentioned Africa. Let's go over to my Google Earth map, which of course has to reload. You can't be gone for too long, or else you have to reload. Um, Africa, it has really come online, and right now these place markers that you see are the sites where there have been these large mass baptisms, where just like a large group of people all get baptized. So you have some in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. There's two that I'm aware of there, two in Nigeria, one in Sierra Leone, but actually two, because this article said that last Saturday they had scheduled 170 people to be baptized. Yeah, right here with 170 people scheduled for baptism this Saturday, which for us is last Saturday. Um, I'll probably add that to the map. I'd rather have like some kind of official confirmation just in case that number changed. But Mali, which is a Muslim nation, they have a very small Christian minority, something along the lines of like 2%. But the church has been granted official status in Mali and in the capital city. There's been success. Even though missionaries can't go into Mali, I think it's the Ivory Coast mission or one, if there, I don't know if there's more than just one, but an Ivory Coast mission has jurisdiction over Mali, and they had like these remote um, meetings, like Zoom meetings, like some kind of video call. And then you've had these mass baptisms. One was 36 people, another was 74. And with that one, yeah, I remember with that one, I think there was a third wave that they were expecting. So I'm probably gonna be adding a couple more of these place markers on here. Um, okay, so anyway, it's just interesting to. Oh yeah, and let's look at Saigon really quick, or in other words, Ho Chi Minh City. Let's go over to Vietnam, and over there, to my surprise, it looks like there's 5 meeting houses in Ho Chi Minh City, and then over here in this part of Vietnam, in I don't know, Bin Duke. I think that's probably where that's at. Looks like there's another meeting house. So Vietnam, he was talking about Islam and communism, and I mean things haven't progressed as quickly as we would have liked, but there has been progress and things are happening, and it's going to be exciting to see what happens in the future. Okay, continuing. But the vision of the future is not all sweetness and light and peace. All that is yet to be shall go forward in the midst of greater evils and perils and desolations than have been known on earth at any time. So do you think that we've seen some of this greater evils and perils and desolations? I mean, I would say evils, yes. Since 1980, evils, yes. Greater evils. Greater perils, yeah. Yeah, I guess there's been a lot of things. Desolations, I do want to point out in his book, Return Due to Inactivity, in his book, The Millennial Messiah, let me just borrow this again. He talks extensively about Armageddon and the final conflict. And at this part on page 453, he says, "How many will be slain, and who shall count the number of dead bodies? When we come to the revealed description of the battle itself, we shall see that the slain will be a third of the inhabitants of the earth itself, however many billions of people that may turn out to be." Um, Again, I don't know. I haven't heard any other prophets or apostles really talk like this. Whenever you just have one that says something, I still pay attention because they're an apostle or a prophet. But I also take it with a grain of salt. If you have more prophets, apostles that repeat that same thing, then I feel more confident that the scripture is being interpreted correctly. He's interpreting 1/3 as being a literal number, which, yeah, that would be in the billions if that's the case. But another thing that's interesting is if you do a search for the word atomic in his book, The Millennial Messiah, it seems like he was very concerned about potential nuclear warfare, which makes sense, especially this being written during the Cold War. And I'm not sure that we're out of the woods when it comes to the prospect of some kind of nuclear conflict. Um, but he used the word atomic 17 times in this book. I really think that he was at least of the opinion that this was going to happen. And then as far as like it being revealed to him, I don't know. It could be. I wouldn't be surprised either way. I'm not going to lose sleep over it, but it could be. It could be. When it comes to billions being killed in the war, I don't. I mean that very well could be, but there's also this other big event that we have coming, which is the destruction of the wicked when Christ comes. So that would drive that number even higher, I guess. I don't know. I don't really know, but there could be some pretty crazy things on the horizon. I wouldn't lose sleep over it. I would just live righteously, be prepared the best you can, both spiritually and temporally. And then I would focus on what has been said over and over and over and over and over again, that we can look to the future with hope and optimism, and that there is safety. Uh, by and large, there is safety for the saints, although not everyone will escape the judgments and things that are coming. Um, Later on, he says, "We see evil forces everywhere uniting to destroy the family, to ridicule morality and decency, to glorify all that is lewd and base. We see wars and plagues and pestilence. Nations rise and fall. Blood and carnage and death are everywhere. Gadiant and robbers fill the judgment seats in many nations, and evil powers seek to overthrow the freedom of all nations and countries. Satan reigns in the hearts of men. It is the great day of his power." I think this is interesting because he's saying here that all these different signs are already present in 1980. And just like other things that we've read, it just seems that over time, these things are going to get worse. And they have. They have. I feel like things have gotten worse. We haven't had a third world war, but out of all these other types of wars, I'd say that things have gotten worse since 1980. Um, you think about crime and you think about just all the conflicts in the world. Yeah, I'd say things have gotten worse. Okay, continuing. This is the last thing I want to share in his talk. Is it any wonder that we both rejoice and tremble at what lies ahead? Truly, the world is and will be in commotion, but the Zion of God will be unmoved. The wicked and ungodly shall be swept from the church, and the little stone will continue to grow until it fills the whole earth. The way ahead is dark and dreary and dreadful. There will yet be martyrs. The doors in Carthage shall again enclose the innocent. We have not been promised that the trials and evils of the world will entirely pass us by. Okay, two things here. I just had a realization. I want to read a quote from President Nelson. Um, let's go to quotes, common misconceptions. He said something very interesting. I think this is back in 2022. Yeah, April 2022 General Conference. So we're reading a talk from Bruce R. McConkie, where he's talking about the coming trials and things getting darker, more dangerous, um, just things getting worse. So in his talk called The Power of Spiritual Momentum, President Nelson said, "We have never needed positive spiritual momentum more than we do now to counteract the speed with which evil and the darker signs of the times are intensifying." So I think that we should take this into account as well, because if you're expecting cinematic, which things can get cinematic and movie like, but if you're expecting nuclear bombs everywhere, if you're expecting the zombie apocalypse, if you're expecting what you see in the movies, then I think that you're probably expecting too much, or things are not going to play out the way that you think. Again, just because it's not happening to you doesn't mean that it's not happening. You think about the Ukraine war. Uh, it's been kind of freaky to see how that war is being fought with all the drones. Whenever you go on X, you have all these like drone videos that are just really sad, and and it is really dark. So not everything has to happen necessarily to us, although they can. But President Nelson is pointing out that these are the darker signs of the times. He says positive spiritual momentum will keep us moving forward amid the fear and uncertainty created by pandemics, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, and armed hostilities. Okay, that being said, when Bruce R. McConkie says there will yet be martyrs and the doors in Carthage shall again enclose the innocent, which I don't think he's literally meaning Carthage, Illinois, again imprisoning members of the church, but just, um, I don't know. I don't know exactly what he's suggesting here, or if he's literally meaning that there will be a time when members of the church are arrested wrongfully and go to jail. I looked into this. Okay. So I looked into, has some of this stuff already happened since 1980? So there's a few things to look at. So when we're talking about martyrs, the first thing that came to mind for me is what happened. This was it was last year, right? I already forgot. Yeah, May or sorry, May. Um, Let me go to my second coming timeline actually, because if I'm not mistaken, it happened like I think the day after President Nelson's birthday. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, President Nelson's 101st birthday. And then where is it? Oh, okay, maybe it wasn't after his. Well, it was near. So his President Nelson's 101st birthday was on September 9th. And then you had this attack in Grand Blanc, Michigan. Oh, it was the day after, sorry, it was the day after President Nelson passed away. President Nelson passed away the day after you had this attack at Grand Blanc, Michigan. There were 4 that were killed. I think that you could consider them martyrs because they were killed for their religious beliefs. So we had that happen. I did my best to see if there have been any other incidents since 1980 where a member of the church was killed for his or her religious beliefs, and like specifically for that, and I couldn't find any. Um, Except for I didn't pull it up, but there were some missionaries in Bolivia. They this was probably back in the 80s. I should have pulled up the article, but they were killed by a local like paramilitary force because they viewed them as representing American imperialism. Sorry, were they arrested? I think they were killed. I don't know, but the point is there hasn't been a whole lot of this kind of thing since 1980. Or just I think in church history in general, except the early days of the church, like the Missouri and Illinois period. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not really aware of any other big events like this. But it is interesting to think that this is basically the worst one in a long time. So that's maybe something to think about. Um, by way of, the doors of Carthage shutting again and arrests, um, there have been some like detainments of missionaries. I have 2 stories here from Russia where missionaries were detained. In this case, these 2 missionaries were detained in their apartment. Um, News of the ruling came down exactly 1 year to the day after Russian President Vladimir Putin signed a new law that limited missionary work. The law requires any proselyting to happen within houses of worship. Missionary work conducted on the street or in residences can be punished with deportation and fines up to $780 per missionary and $15,500 per church. After the law went into effect, the LDS Church redesignated all its missionaries in Russia as volunteers and instructed them to obey the law. Okay, so we had that. And then there was this. So that was back in, this article is from 2017. And then we have another one from 2019. Some missionaries detained in Russia for more than 2 weeks in an alleged visa violation case. The men were treated well and permitted to stay in contact with their relatives and church officials during the detention. Church spokesman Eric Hawkins said in a statement. Okay. Now, that actually is similar to a couple times that Joseph Smith was incarcerated. So, for example, I just recently found out when he was first brought to Independence after being arrested at Far West, they were kept in this location, but they were allowed to go out and mingle with the people. They were allowed to go and walk and go see the temple lot. And then at Carthage jail, they were actually treated very kindly by the jailer and his wife. It's just when the mob came, that's when we had problems. But so anyway, I don't know. So you had some detentions here. And then when we're talking about trials and stuff like that, and persecution and whatever, there is this that happened. This is from last year. Russia blacklists BYU and German NGO as undesirable. So this is yet another setback in Russia. And then this is what I was talking about earlier in Beijing. LDS Church suffers setback in China as government shuts down congregations in Beijing. Oh, and other cities. I don't have access to the whole article, but at least in Beijing, two branches in the capital of Beijing. So we've had that setback. And then we've had recently a number of controversies and like basically opposition to temples that have been announced. For example, you have the Heber Valley Temple in Utah, of all places, but there's been pushback on that, as well as one down in Las Vegas. I think it's called the Lone Mountain Temple. And then the Fairview Temple in Texas. But there's been many other times that temples have seen opposition from the local community. So we've had that kind of thing going on, and it's probably going to continue, especially with the number of temples that have been announced and that are going to be announced in the future. And then I put together a spreadsheet called Timeline Anti-Church Chants, because it seems like this has been a trend lately in college sports, where you have these different universities when BYU goes to play at these different places, and then fans of the home team will, I think it's when they go and play over there. That should maybe be another column. I think that these are all times that BYU has played. They've been the visitor. And you've had incidents at all these different universities: Stanford, University of Arizona, UCLA, San Diego State, and on and on and on. These different colleges where the home team fans would do these horrible anti-church chants that were really offensive, aggressive, and not nice. So these are the ones that I know about. There's probably a lot more that I don't know about, but it does seem to be picking up in frequency. And then, of course, you have other things like this. You have the Book of Mormon musical. Here's the one that's playing here in Kansas City. But, this has been going on, I think, since like about 2012, maybe a little bit earlier. Put together by the creators of South Park, and South Park itself has taken a lot of digs at the church in the TV series itself. And then you have all this other nonsense right here, like the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, which is not at all an accurate depiction of what wives in the church are like. Wives and mothers. This is just ludicrous. And there's many other shows that I can point to. So I'd say in a lot of ways, things have gotten worse since 1980. As far as martyrs, I don't know. Maybe there will be more. I have no idea. But what happened in Michigan is pretty stunning, and it is like a bigger event than. Well, it's one of the only events that I could classify as members of the church being martyred. And then being jailed, I haven't seen too much of that. But if you know of any other cases, let me know in the comments or send me an email, and I may do a follow-up video. So anyway, the most important thing, like I said, is for us to live as faithfully as we can, live within our covenants, be smart, be kind, because, if we don't live in a Christ-like way and we don't treat others with respect, then I don't know that the Lord is going to protect us. One of the issues in the early days of the church here in Jackson County was that there were a lot of members that were being overzealous about, this becoming the city of Zion. That wasn't the only thing. There were other issues like difference in politics and religion and other stuff too. But it didn't help if the saints were being It didn't help with the saints, in some cases, being boastful, and we should avoid that same thing. We should always be kind and Christ-like to others. So anyway, that's going to be it for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.